Hey everyone.
There we are. Hey,
We are
Daniel.
live again. How are you? How are you, Michael?
Good. I'm doing really good. How are you?
Oh, very good. How
Good.
how was your trip to California?
It was really good actually. Yeah, went down south and had a really nice time. It's nice to we had a plan for a while, so we're like, let's just do it. So we
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
it's kind of like just ourselves and stuff, but we had a really nice time.
yeah. Sounds very good.
Yeah.
Cool. I felt there was this something I wanted to share announcement wise, but I can't really remember it. So let's just jump into some questions, should we?
Absolutely.
Cool. So let's see here. Let's add this to the stream. And I realized oh, by the way, that was kind of my announcement, was that for everyone that submitted questions now through our form, which is on our website, thank you so much. It makes it actually so much easier. And the first question here wasn't actually a question. This is more of a success story of sorts. So I'll save that for later from Lynn. And thanks so much for this, Lynn. It really helps a lot. And then let's jump to actually a question that came in from Frima, I believe that was the first one. Where is it? I think it was, there it is. Okay, let's read this. Hi, hope you're doing well. I'm doing very well, thank you. Is there a biological explanation for this? Over the weekend, I ended up sleeping a lot, but really needed it. One night, 9 hours, the next one, 7 hours. For me, this is more than my typical 5 to 6 hours. I only get up an hour later, but fell asleep early the first night. Last night at 10 p.m., I felt sleepy, took that as a cue to go to bed. After an hour of just resting in bed, I realized that my sleep drive was very weak. I didn't have a chance to exercise during the day. Does sleeping longer and not being as active reduce sleep drive through, though I only slept an hour later? I started to feel a bit sleepy early in the morning, but not enough for sleep. Could that be that my circadian rhythm was already sending alerting signals, since I usually get up then? Asking these questions because it's helpful to understand the science a bit. Thank you. So, I have some thoughts. What do you think spontaneously when you hear a question or a message like this, Michael?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is that you can't ever force sleep. It's not possible. Nobody can. So kind of have to start with that. But it sounds like it's sleeping in, longer, and then the next time maybe a little less, and then you get to a point where you don't feel sleepy at all. Excuse me. That's that's kind of just sort of it's kind of like not working with your circadian rhythm as well as you could, perhaps, and which is really simply, people think about circadian rhythms and they get a lot of people get very kind of confused. They don't know exactly what it is and all that. You don't really have to understand much, except that if you can be consistent in your morning, generally consistent, maybe get outside a little bit for a few minutes. That's about all you can do to really anchor your circadian rhythm. And so that's really what we're talking about, is kind of when sleep ends. So like I said, you can't force your sleep. You can't make it happen. That nobody can, but you can end it. You can do the purposeful set of behaviors that we call getting up for the day. And when you do that at a fairly consistent time, that's about all you can do with your circadian rhythm. I mean, you could throw in, don't take a big nap in the afternoon, and that's fine. But most people with insomnia don't do that. It's really about just being kind of consistent in the morning, independent of the night. The night's like over, it's done. It doesn't play into this at all. It's just like you decide at a certain time, maybe like between 7 and 8 or something like that. You just say, I'm just going to start my day. And you just move on from there. So other than that, you can't control anything else. So you have to kind of have that attitude going into it, that understanding, that realization that, most people get into trouble with their sleep when they try to start controlling it. They try to start forcing it at a certain time. You get very curious why they're not sleepy at a certain time. All of this, you can't control that. And it's hard for some people. It's really hard, because most people kind of control a lot of stuff during the day. You just do things during the day at your own schedule most of the time, kind of you're sort of like making things organized and all that. And that's fine. That's great. But sleep is different. It's just different. And that's where the challenge is for a lot of people. So those are just kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you noticed, I started kind of really smiling there at a point when you were talking,
Yeah.
Miley, because that was, you were saying you can't control it. So true. And then you said and then people try to control it and they get really curious. And that's where I sense, like in this message, I sense that curiosity, that kind of like, it's not, there's not much emotion. There's not, I don't read any
Right.
real anxiety here, but it's that just, I'm just curious. I'm just trying to figure it out. And I think that is the key here. Yeah, you sense a lot of curiosity in this message.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how does the circadian rhythm work? How
Yeah.
does this work? If I sleep this little, this, if I get, and that, no judgment. There's nothing wrong with curiosity, but when you have trouble sleeping, curiosity easily leads to puzzlement. It leads to bewilderment. It leads to attention. It leads to figuring it out, which all leads to this kind of hyper arousal, which leads to less sleep, and then you become more curious, etc. So I just want to, what I want to say is simply that there is absolutely no mystery. Yes, there is this thing called sleep drive, which is basically sleepiness. And then if you're anxious or hyperaroused, that makes you sleep less. Yes, that's another factor. That's the gas and the brake. And then we have the circadian rhythm, but there's no mystery. There's just like Coach Michael says there, if you get up about the same time every day, you don't go to bed too early, and then you kind of like don't do anything else. You know, that's it.
That's all you can do. And same with like, you know, like for example, this is a little off topic, but like people who travel and they ask about jet lag, you know, you probably get questions about that too, and how to minimize it. And it's really not a big secret. Like you just try to be on the activity pattern of where you now are. That's kind of all you can, which is like, it's hard. I mean, it doesn't feel physically or very good, you know, and no one likes jet lag. I mean, let's just get serious. It's hard, you know, the farther you go and the worse it gets. But the way to try to, and this gets into the circadian rhythm, it's like you want to stabilize your circadian rhythm for where you are. I mean, if you wanted to keep your circadian rhythm the same, you might be waking up at 1 a.m. and starting your day, and then going to bed at like 4 p.m. at the end of your day. But most people want to be on the schedule of where they're going. So what can you do? You kind of just fall into it. You just kind of try to fall into line as best you can. Maybe not all at once, but it might take a few days. But that's kind of what you're doing, is you're realigning your circadian rhythm. So at home on a regular basis, you just want to try to keep it fairly consistent in the morning. Bedtime, completely different story. But the morning, it's consistency, and that's kind of that's what it is. You know, that's what all you can really do as far as that side of things goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a very quick little note here. I think that thing about being fairly consistent with your morning, or when you get up, that pretty much applies to everyone, whether you have insomnia or not. It's kind of generally helpful. So nothing mysterious and strange about that one. Cool. Let's move forward. And this is from Pat. Hi, Daniel. I'm currently undergoing CBTi with a therapist, making some progress, but it's slow. I'm finding this course of therapy is making me think too much about sleep, and decided after 8 weeks to take a week off and not keep the sleep diary. My therapist is fine with that. I plan to adhere to my sleep window, 11:30 to 6:30, and not take any naps. Do you think this is a good idea? I thought I'd give it a try. Also, do older people take more time with CBTi? I'm 62. Your videos have been so helpful. I just bought your book, Set and Forget It. Thank you very much. Everyone out there, if you like it, don't forget to review it. That helps a lot. Looking forward to reading it. Thank you so much for your insight. I can go first with this one. And I think the short answer is it is a great idea. I think it's a fantastic idea. I think you're on the right track, definitely here, Pat. I mean, you've realized the kind of like the paradox with everything we do here in a way is that the key to sleeping well is really not paying attention at all. So why do we have a big YouTube channel and we have programs and everything? Well, all that is basically to teach you what you're realizing, that the less attention you give it, the better you sleep. And CBTi can be a great way to start, but then eventually you have to let go. So yes, I personally, we talk sometimes about sleep diaries, and what I have started asking people is to like stop checking the time at a certain point, and then kind of get up about the same time, and really, and just like, how do you feel? So I think a lot of sleep diaries are problematic because they ask you for so much information. So anyway, that was just a long way of saying that I think it is very good to let go of the sleep diary for sure. And I definitely believe good things will come your way. So I guess that was really my answer. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah. Okay. So first thing that comes to mind is when you were interviewing Sasha Stevens last week, I think it was, she used the phrase, we walk this paradoxical tightrope. And when she said that, I thought, that's exactly it. It's exactly it. We're trying to improve our sleep, but we're trying not to think about it. How does that even work? And she didn't have a really good explanation for that. I don't think anyone really
because
does.
there isn't really any, right?
There isn't one. Yeah, there isn't one. But she used this phrase, paradoxical tightrope, and I was like, that's exactly right. Like when I'm working with a client, it's like it's a tightrope. It's like, okay, let's have you change this a little bit. I think that might help, but let's not focus on it. Let's have, it's like this tightrope, and it's just like, oh my gosh, that was it. So that was one thing. The other thing is, yeah, you're talking about like a sleep diary or a sleep log. Yeah, as you know, I'm not a huge fan of them in general, of the sleep log. But when I do ask a client some questions that are sort of like a sleep log, yeah, I definitely want to know kind of what time they get up in the morning, because all I'm looking for is like how variable that is. I don't really care what time it is, but it's like, oh, anywhere between like, oh, I'll throw in the towel at 5 in the morning sometimes, but then sometimes I'll sleep until noon. And I think, okay, well, that's low hanging fruit. We have a really easy place to start for some impact, and that's what you should do. And I'll ask about like, okay, when you wake up during the night, what time is it usually? And that's my sneaky little way of finding out if they check the clock at night, which is another thing I like. But I don't ask them like, I don't care what time they wake up, because, eventually I get around to explaining that everyone wakes up multiple times every night. So that's not the issue. The issue is like, do you know what time it is? Are you like tracking that? And so you can kind of get that. But then the other questions I like to ask are very subjective. It's kind of like, how much of a problem is falling asleep? How much of a problem is getting back to sleep after you wake up during the night? I ask like that kind of phrasing. I don't say like, how long does it take you to fall asleep? Or what time do you wake up? Or how long are you awake during that? I don't ask those questions. That's just adding fuel to the fire, I think. But I ask like the subjective version, which is kind of like, how much of a problem is this? How much of a problem is that? And scale of 1 to 5 or something like that, something easy, just to get a little idea of kind of what they're experiencing, sort of like emotionally and psychologically, not like biologically. It's more like, how do you feel about it? Because that really is kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah, and just for everyone for whom it isn't obvious why Coach Michael asks these type of questions, it is when you ask, how much do you struggle? How much of a problem is this for you? That highlights that it is your thinking about it that is the thing you should work on, not objectively how much you sleep, etc. I think so. That's the beauty of those type of questions. And what else did I want to say here? Oh yeah, I just want to say I think we answered at length there. I hope that was really helpful, Pat. But what you're doing there, kind of like letting go, is what I call a sleep detox. You're just like, okay, I know enough now. I can kind of like just forget about this whole thing, and sleep will come my way. And yeah, perfect. So let us move on here. And by the way, that paradoxical tightrope, I have to listen to that interview myself. That was such a great phrase.
Oh yeah, I remember listening to it. I paused it and I went back and I was like, what did she just say? That's it. And it was just like this light bulb went on. I was like, yes, now I have at least some way to describe it.
Yes. All right, here's from Faye here. Faye has submitted some questions. Always very nice to hear from you, Faye. Let's read this. Hi, Daniel. Faye here again. I love your weekly videos you post on YouTube. Thank you so much for all the support. I'm doing great lately and sleeping around 6 hours plus on average without medication. Amazing. However, sometimes I'm worried about the hypnic jerks or the sleep transitioning symptoms like gasping for air or the sensation when I'm about to hit the car in front of you, that the worry itself sometimes causes these. Anyways, to change the state of mind when I get these thoughts or something I can do about it when it pops up. I'm still sleeping great, but this sometimes bothers me. So I wanted to ask, also, I'm kind of worried about relapsing. If there is a way to prevent relapse, I would love some insight. Thank you, as usual, Daniel. Love your work. So thanks so much again, Faye. And I think just to summarize here, we have kind of 2 questions. One is the sleep transitioning things and how almost worrying about that happening in itself is kind of the problem. And then kind of the relapse prevention, quote unquote, question. So yeah, Michael, what are your thoughts? Oops, wrong button.
I think as far as the transition stuff, it's it's a big physiological change to go from wake to sleep, just pure and simple. It's really complex. If you look at like the brain chemistry and all kinds of things, way beyond what we're talking about here. You know, these are like scientists who like study all these pathways and stuff. So you don't need to get into that at all. Just understand that some things can change. Your breathing can change a little bit when you go from wake to sleep. And sometimes people who are hyper aroused, they notice it. Like they're so focused on it. Like, oh my gosh, was I just not breathing for a second? What was that? You know, or they might have a fleeting thought, and it's kind of like, oh wait, what's happening here? You know, it's like they're just so in tune with their own functioning that they, you know, they get in the way of sleep. You know, they just like, it's like the brake just goes like boom, like straight to the floor, and the car comes skidding to a stop in a really chaotic way because the sleep drive is still kind of there. So it's like, you know, so the key is not to be hyper focused on what's happening. You know, it's like, it's a very natural process. And we kind of get into a little bit of the control thing. You know, some people kind of like, they want to control how they fall asleep, and it's like, you can't do that. It's sort of like, you know, someone who's anxious when they're awake. You know, okay, think about that. Here's a scenario. So like, it's like dark, and it's like you're alone, and you're like kind of like, I don't know, you're going around a corner and you're sort of anxious, you know, and then you hear like a little, like, I don't know, a little cat like move, and you just freak out. Your heart rate just goes, and it's like that little sudden, innocuous, you know, benign thing suddenly just triggers this huge emotional response. That's kind of similar to people who fall asleep and they notice something is a little different. Something changes, you know, maybe it's like their arm just slumps a little bit, and they just like have a hypnic jerk, and you know, so it's, you have to kind of not monitor yourself. You have to kind of get outside of yourself a little bit. That's just, I don't know, that's a strange thing, but you know, it's like mentally you want to just not be really like focused on what's happening with you. And it takes some time to kind of get there, but it has to happen, you know, because if you're not somewhere else, then you're present in yourself during the transition, and it's going to be like, it's going to make it way more challenging. So that's kind of comments on the first part, just transition side of things.
You know, I was actually super excited reading this because I have like the perfect analogy, and I was almost about to do this, Michael, when you were talking.
Yeah.
Does it tell you anything? Yeah, the airplane analogy.
The airplane, yeah. I threw that one out there, and I didn't even know where I was going with it a couple weeks ago. There's something about an airplane landing that's kind of like it's sort of like, it can be a little bumpy. It's not perfect, but you know, okay, so if you're a passenger in the plane and you're coming in for a landing, and every little movement of the plane, you just like panic, you know, which some people do because you have this fear of flying on an airplane. But, you know, it's that same idea that, you know, you can be pretty confident that the airplane's going to land. I mean, it's like, that's pretty, you know, pretty darn high probability. It's a probability that your brain at the right time, in the right circumstances, will go to sleep if you are not focused on the transition, you know? So like, if it's coming in for landing, I don't know, maybe you're reading a magazine and you're like lost in a story, and all of a sudden you go, oh, we're on the ground already. It's like, that's kind of how you want to treat your sleep in that sense. You know, you got to be somewhere else with your mind, you know, just go.
Yeah, 100%. I you know, it's funny for those of you who didn't see that episode. I think it was 2 weeks ago. Michael, I think you in the moment started thinking about an airplane landing or something. But it became the perfect analogy from these transitional events where if you're flying, it's kind of you're awake and you're landed at your sleep, and it typically is like it's a little bumpy going in there. But if you don't pay attention to the bumps, you do it.
Yeah, it's not exactly smooth, perfectly smooth. It's not, and for no one, you know, everybody's sleep is the same.
And so, okay, cool. So I think we talked, you know, quite at length there about like hypnic jerks and other like transitional events and how to kind of approach those. But okay, so the second question, which is kind of the same, which is, okay, I'm almost afraid of having the jerks. That in itself is a problem for me. And I'm afraid of having a relapse in my insomnia. And now here's the thing. They're kind of like, the intuitive thing to do is to find ways to kind of convince yourself that it's not going to happen. You can tell yourself like, but I'm doing good, and I know all these things, and I have all the tools, and I'm going to be fine. And that can keep you in a state of like, you kind of convincing yourself that you're good, and you can do pretty good, right? But it's not the best way. the best way is actually paradoxically this one, that the best relapse prevention is not trying to prevent a relapse. The best way not to have a relapse is actually paradoxically to be okay with having a relapse, which sounds kind of terrible, but it is, because it is when you do anything to be like, I don't want to have trouble sleeping again, so therefore I have to do X, Y, and Z to not, then you're living in fear. You are always kind of have that low level anxiety, you're kind of managing sleep, and it never feels, and then you're actually at higher risk of having trouble sleeping. Because when something feels like I can't manage it anymore, then you have trouble again. So paradoxically, Faye, I want to say, if you think, yeah, I might have trouble sleeping in the future, maybe for even a stretch of time, but that's okay. I'm not going to really do anything about that. I'm accepting that can happen in the future. Then there's no fear. Then that thing that's, it's like I say, like if you're willing to experience X, then X has no power over you. That's for the relapse. And also for that, like, yeah, I have fear of having a Hypnic jerks, and that's okay to have that fear. I'm not going to try to push away that fear. And that is the way, like being willing to experience X. You have no except no, that's my answer to that one, I think.
Yeah, exactly right.
Perfect. Cool. Let's move ahead. What's the time? 10:20. Okay, we got some more time here. Great. Nick, let's read this. Hi, I'm another person who believes he has SFI. I was addicted to kratom for 7 years, and it's been known to cause neurological problems. Look it up. Actually, side note, there was somebody else who was very concerned about kratom on the channel. I think it was more than a year ago. So I did look at it at that point. It's a plant from Asia that acts like an opiate. I only found out about the problem it causes when I realized I was having neurological problems and looked up quitting kratom on Reddit. I wish I had known earlier. Over the course of a month after coming off the kratom, I had severe insomnia without meds, couldn't relax to sleep, really just would nod off to hypnagogic state while on meds, so no deep sleep, barely any REM, episodes of confusion, unexplained weight loss, serious constipation, higher heart rate than normal, tremors, twitches, muscle spasms in every muscle when used, peripheral neuropathy, panic attacks, reduced quality thoughts, short-term memory problems, reduced behavior, barely see anyone, have a hard time listening to music, watch TV, altered perception, now bordering hallucinations, serious disorientation, blurry vision, eye twitches, ringing in the ears. These are all my symptoms. I already had most of these symptoms before reading about SFI. My jaw dropped when I read a bunch of sources, especially National Organization of Rare Diseases spoke to the only place that researches prime diseases in Case Western and said I needed a spinal tap and PET scan, which nobody will give me. She said there was no known environmental cause, and they never heard of kratom. I had an MRI, which was clear, but that proves nothing. My family, friends, and wife think it's anxiety and that I'm crazy to think it's SFI, but it's like I have most of the symptoms and it keeps progressing. I know your advice is to stop looking for symptoms and just live my life, but it's so hard having that on my mind constantly. It's like OCD. I feel like I'm alone in this and it's maddening. I've been feeling so distant from people and my reality has taken a surreal tone. Any advice would be appreciated. Nick. All right. Well, I want to say, Nick, thanks for sharing this and thanks for, submitting this question. And I think if you haven't already done so, I would listen to that talk I had with Casper, whose mom passed away from SFI, and it becomes super clear when you hear that story that SFI has nothing to do with insomnia. It really doesn't. It is, if it's with SFI, it's kind of like this, like Creutzfeldt-Jakob or something like that. That it pretty quickly becomes obvious to other people that there's something wrong with you, while you may not necessarily know that, whereas when your story is the complete opposite. And it's just pretty much quote unquote everyone that has a concern about SFI is like this, that the person who's worried themselves is noticing things within themselves that they find are really concerning, but other people around them say, there's nothing there. It's just anxiety. And I think, I hate to be another person who says it's just anxiety, but I think for pretty much everyone, and nothing here is a medical advice, to anyone. But when you hear this, like, I noticed this with myself, I noticed this with myself, and I noticed this with myself, that typically comes from like this self-monitoring, this concern, this fear, that's where it comes from. So I think I just want to say that as obvious as it is how bothered you are and how what the place you're in, Nick, there's nothing that is really unusual about your email. These are things that we hear about all the time here. So I just want to say maybe educate yourself here, or other sources that you find are reputable, like Reddit and other places often just confuse you. But hang in there, Nick, and let us know if there are any follow-up questions, of course.
Yeah,
And
watch the video. Watch the video with Casper. It's so informative, and it's not just the symptoms. It's sort of like the progression of symptoms. That's really what's important with SFI. Is it's not just, like Daniel said, it's not like insomnia is like maybe something I think that can kind of happen towards the end of it or something, but even then it's like not always the same. And there's so few cases that it's like, and I think, like, when you're solving a problem, you want to start with the simplest possibilities first, right? It's like if you see something wrong with something, you try not to go to the big potential thing first, especially if it's super, super rare. You want to start simple. And I think there are some simple things, Nick, that you could consider that might give you, if nothing else, a little more insight to your situation. And I think if Nick, if you came to me as a client, I would start probably with the basics, just really straightforward, initial kinds of things to just try to stabilize the sleep schedule a little bit, work on the confidence of your sleep and things like that. I think that's, even if it doesn't necessarily get you to where you want to be, it'd be really interesting to see if you can make some progress. And then that might help you realize that it's okay. It's not this neurodegenerative condition. It's something else. And maybe, the thought work that you can do and some behavioral change that can maybe get you to a little bit better place. So watch the video. It's so really informative. It really is informative.
All right, hang in there, Nick. Let's see here. Okay, so I think we actually are gonna answer all the questions because I believe this is the last one for the. Yeah, good. Okay, this is from Francis. Oh, where did it go? Oh, here it is. Okay. Hi, Diane. Love your channel. Thanks so much. I'm having some difficulties recently. I never really suffered sleepless nights, and over the years, except for the night before exams or important events. I'm a master's student in university, so under a great deal of pressure, some family drama going on in the last few weeks, and I'm more stressed than usual. I'm going 3 or even 4 nights without any sleep, as in up all night, 0 sleep. After 3 nights of no sleep, not even 10 minutes, I feel like I'm going to go nuts, cannot function, even putting thoughts together in my head is difficult. If this continues, I will have to drop out of school. I don't like taking pills, but after the 3 or 4 nights of 0 sleep, I take a Xanax, and it puts me to sleep. I know this is not a solution and don't want to take it, but I'm afraid of what will happen if the sleepless nights run into the 4th or 5th or 6th night. I've been taking your advice about restriction and getting out of bed, etc. How do I break this loop of 3 days, then a Xanax, then another 3 days and a Xanax? Should I just not take the pill and keep going? The day after the Xanax sleep, I feel a lot better and I'm able to get work done. Unlike after 3 days of wake, I'm useless and I get nothing done. I'm only having this problem the last 3 weeks. But it scares me when I read about people suffering like this for years or even decades. Thank you for your hard work. And this channel is a lifesaver. Thank you so much, Francis. And so I guess to summarize in this one, we have sort of 2 questions, which is how do I break this cycle? And also would like to talk about the concern of like, when the horror stories you hear, some people who have troubles, insomnia for like decades, like what's that about? But okay, your spontaneous thoughts, Michael, on this question here.
Yeah, it's a common pattern. A couple poor nights, and then you take something. A couple poor nights, you take something. We have talked about the gas and brake model a lot. Well, here it's like the gas pedal is getting pressed and pressed and pressed, but you got you're holding things back, and then on that 3rd night, you take a chemical that kind of takes your, kind of reduces general anxiety. It doesn't put you to sleep. It just reduces general anxiety, which then, to some degree gets your brake off a little bit, and then you sleep. And so you're attributing that chemical to sleep, but it's what you should be attributing it to is that you are no longer focused on your sleep. You're not trying. You stop trying. it'd be, I think that those are the behaviors you want to learn. You want to learn the thoughts and behaviors that keep you from trying to force your sleep. Take a whole different attitude towards the night. Realize during the day that maybe you're functioning at least a little bit better than you might think you are. Kind of take stock of that a little bit during the day, like look back on your day and be like, well, it was okay. It wasn't, but for not sleeping at all, you'd think your day would be completely gone. Like you just lie in bed all day long, not able to even get up or anything, but it's not true. And so working on the hyperarousal, doing the thought work to get you to a place where you realize that being awake at night, oops, I'm sorry, one of my earphones fell out. I got it. Want to, getting to a place where you want to understand that being awake at night is not a big deal, like kind of enjoying the time and just like not focusing on sleep. It's all about that effort, that trying that really kind of drives it. And then I guess I would just kind of start with that. Education, that's a good place to start.
Always a good place to start. And I think what we can learn here is that, there was some obvious stressors, which is often the case when you start having trouble sleeping. And then I think what we read in this email or this message is that it seems kind of maybe out of proportion. It's like, I don't sleep at all for 3 nights. And, it's a very common thing you hear from people that trouble sleeping, that it's like the brain is always on the lookout trying to keep you safe, right? So it always tries to tell you, this is not normal. This is not just regular insomnia. Something is different. And one way it can do that is to tell you, for example, but you don't sleep at all for 3 nights. That is different. And that thought comes from a place of safety. The brain tries to keep you safe. And it's just good to understand that. So when your brain tries to tell you this is different, this time is different, then it's like, okay, brain, I know you're trying to keep me safe, but that doesn't really mean anything, because insomnia always comes from the safe place. It's like Coach Michael says, it is when you're hyper focused on sleep, when you're trying to keep yourself from being awake all night, that's where it comes from. But so that was a little bit of that. But in terms of this pattern, I think I want to take a quick little detour into the land of panic attacks. I think we can learn a lot from those. So this is a typical thing from a panic attack, or why people have multiple panic attacks is really the following, that, it's driven from some anxiety. You feel something like, oh no, I'm going to have a panic attack. Then it escalates. Then it feels stronger. Here it comes. And then there's a safety behavior like taking medication, sitting down, doing breathing exercises, and then it went away. Okay. And the problem here is that you think that there was something catastrophic that was about to happen that you prevented by doing that safety thing, whatever that safety thing, you prevented something catastrophic. And then you feel actually good. You're like, good, I prevented a catastrophe. But the problem is that the brain is now in high gear, looking for another potential catastrophe to happen. And then you have to deploy that safety mechanism again and again and again. And we see the same thing with insomnia. It's like, you don't sleep at all for 3 nights. And then it's like, oh my gosh, if I go 4 nights or 5 nights or 6 nights, I'm going to go insane. Something terrible. A catastrophe is going to happen. So of course I have to take that Xanax. When you take the Xanax, you sleep, you feel, oh good, thankfully, at least I have the Xanax. Without that, something can. So what happens is, by keeping this pattern going, you're preventing yourself from seeing that there is actually no disaster happening. There is no catastrophe. Eventually, you would sleep, if you weren't maintaining this kind of fear. And taking something every 3 nights is very problematic. So what I always tell people that I work with is that medications themselves may not be a problem, but their problem, I learned this from you actually, Michael, it's a problem when they're taken conditionally. If somebody takes the same dose, the same medication every night, it's really not a problem because it's a non-factor. Then the person will see that how much they sleep really doesn't depend on that medication. It becomes a non-thing. Or if somebody doesn't take a medication at all, then this is no problem. But when somebody takes kind of waits and let's see how long I can go without taking this, it creates so much anxiety because you're always monitoring this. Okay, it's been 1 night. It's been 2 nights. Dang it, I'm going to take that Xanax again if I don't sleep tonight. But so I hope I sleep tonight because then I don't have to say, dang it, I didn't sleep at all. You see, it's that monitoring that creates all that pressure and anxiety. And I know I talked quite a bit here, but I have to sneak in one more thing that I've been thinking about lately, which is the delegation. Super important. So oftentimes you think when you have trouble sleeping that there's some kind of problem and you have to now kind of monitor it or control it, right? So instead of delegating sleep to that personal sleep assistant you have in your brain and you're just like, you take care of it, I'm not going to do anything, you're starting to manage it, right? That's where insomnia comes from. So here's the thing. When you take a medication, it's sort of like delegating, because now you no longer feel responsible, like, oh, good, I don't have to manage my sleep because the medication is managing it for me. I've delegated it to this medication. And that's so much of why medications seem to help, is that you're delegating the work. You're no longer responsible. You're like, and the thing is, when you're delegating to medication, the problem becomes that you never believe in yourself, right? So you never really build confidence. But if you could do the same, but just delegate it to your brain, you would be good. If you just be like, oh, now it's time to sleep. I'm delegating sleep to my brain and I'm not going to interfere. It's the same thing, same delegation. But if you delegate it to your brain, then you know that you have everything you need to sleep. So those are some thoughts.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of times people will talk about the rebound insomnia, someone who's just, they just get sick of taking something for sleep. They just like, I got to get off this stuff. I'm just not going to take it tonight. And then they don't sleep, which is very predictable, of course, because just like the brake pedal is like completely down. They're just convinced, well, that thing was making me sleep. So now I'm not going to take it because I don't want to anymore, but I'm not going to sleep. And so it's like, it gets into like a spiral, right? It just kind of like keeps going and going. So, the key is to develop confidence in yourself, in specifically in your ability to not focus on sleep. And that can take some time.
It can take some time, but you can have some magical moments right away. It's funny here because we have a kind of live comment from Renless, who said, I downloaded BedTyme app. And what I just talked about, delegation, I because that's kind of a new thought to me. I told her about that on the app. And look at that. It was so helpful. I slept wonderfully.
That's great.
That's amazing. Super happy, Ren. And
awesome.
Oh man, that's great. Super, super happy. Yeah. And that's kind of a perfect way to end this. And you're hosting our for our members, our drop-in class here in about 20 minutes.
Yep, we'll be on Zoom at top of the hour.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So we can share this together here. That's if anyone who wants to join our self-coaching master program, head over to our website, and me and Michael are hosts. Like, we're moderating 1 week each, and it always ends with,
or sometimes two if one of us goes on vacation. Gosh. So yeah, it's super fun. Those members are great. They're just they ask great questions, and it's really it's a really nice community, and super exciting to be part of it.
And by the way, I've realized, because now we have like 4 self-coaching students and we have 2 certification students, and it becomes so helpful for both to understand like both sides of it. It's really this. It's becoming a really magical place, I think. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like the self-coaching, they want to do some thought work and change their thinking. And someone who's doing the certification wants to understand maybe how to word things or phrase things to help change that thinking. So it's like, boom, it's like they're right there, and we're kind of just moderating it and, offering little things here and there. And it's a really nice community. It really is.
And so, I'll end here by saying just that, so we don't talk about this so much lately, but if anybody wants to do what we're doing to become a certified sleep coach, got a program for that as well.
Yep.
All right. Well, Michael, have a nice weekend. And thanks everyone for all the contributions. And we'll be back next week.
See you later, everybody.